The privilege of opening the first trial in history for crimes against the peace of the world imposes a grave responsibility. The wrongs which we seek to condemn and punish have been so calculated, so malignant, and so devastating that civilization cannot tolerate their being ignored because it cannot survive their being repeated.
During World War II, 6 million Jews and millions of other innocent civilians were murdered at the hands of the Nazis. After the war ended in Europe in May of 1945, some of the leading Nazi figures were apprehended and put on trial. The International Military Tribunal, known as the infamous Nuremberg Trial, set a historic precedent for the world's prosecution of war criminals. It changed the course of international law for future generations.
The Nuremberg trials were clearly a landmark event in the development of international law.
There had never been anything quite like putting on trial the people who had made a war and then had, in the course of that war, persecuted all sorts of people and killing tens of millions.
Nuremberg clarified international law and imposed individual responsibility for international war crimes.
It was a warning that crime is crime even if big government employees manipulate it. That was Nuremberg's prime contribution to law.
It's the bedrock on which generations down, people like us study and teach and try and build on some of these legacies of the Nuremberg trials.
The International Military Tribunal was formed by the four Allies: the United States, Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. American Justice Robert H. Jackson led the charge to indict the German leaders under the rule of law.
In June of 1945, Robert Jackson wrote a report to Harry Truman, but really a public document, and it was released and published in every newspaper in the United States and around the world. The question is, what are we to do with these captured perpetrators? We could let them go, regarding war as something that men have always done. You know, the victor keeps the spoils, and that's the way it works out. You win the war. Or we could line them up and shoot them. Or in the middle, we could do something that would live up to the rule of law. Jackson said, I'm a rule of law person. I'm a jurist. I'm a prosecutor. That's what I'm here to do. That's what I propose to do.
"22 people were put on trial, and they were meant to represent the remaining senior leadership of Nazi Germany.
The Nuremberg trials brings together so much of this evidence in order to make a case, to present a story of what happened and what did the Nazis do.
The most important part of the prosecution's case in every situation depended on the German documents. The Germans were very meticulous record keepers.
We're talking about millions and millions of pages of documentation, and that documentation is one of the most important collections of documentation about World War II and especially about the Holocaust in existence.
We were doing the translation. We found a very interesting document in the course of this trial called the Endlösung. That means the final solution. It's 15 pages long, and I translated it. Dr. Kempner asked all these people if they'd been at that meeting, No, I never had anything to do with that. He said, well, what about this? And they didn't know it was so beautifully documented.
Some of the defendants relied on the defense that they were ordered to do so. Nuremberg clarified that superior orders was not a defense to criminal acts.
When those films were played of concentration camp survivors, emaciated people, striped uniforms, terrible squalor, some of the defendants were visibly affected. Some averted their gazes, some looked blasé, but some, facing the atrocity that flowed from what they'd been part of, did seem to understand in a new and deeper way.
The International Military Tribunal of 1945 lasted for almost 1 year. On October 1st, 1946, the tribunal handed down its verdicts. 11 were given the death penalty, 3 were acquitted, 3 were given life imprisonment, and 4 were given imprisonment ranging from 10 to 20 years.
The trial set a precedent of an international tribunal that can try people for crimes not committed in the country of the prosecutors or in the country of the judges.
The idea that perpetrating crimes in war against opponents, against occupied populations, brutality, extermination, imprisonment, torture, is somehow defensible as a use of power was not true.
The Nuremberg trial had an influence and impact on the development of the International Criminal Tribunals for former Yugoslavia, the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, and international criminal law, human rights law, and humanitarian law in particular.
There are people, and the law embodies what they are. But if their best faculties are being used, it embodies the best of what they are. And then that pulls the people forward, and they can build on that in positive ways. Law is just us, but our better laws make for better us. And I think Nuremberg deserves some of that credit.
The Nuremberg Trials set a precedent concerning the creation of international laws for the prosecution of war criminals, genocide, and crimes against humanity.
That 4 great nations, flushed with victory and stung with injury, stay the hand of vengeance and voluntarily submit their captive enemies to the judgment of the law is one of the most significant tributes that power has ever paid to reason.